I'm an old man and I've known a great many troubles, most of which never happened. That's a quote by Mark Twain. And I think that most people, if not everyone, can relate to that quote. Maybe not the old man part, but definitely the great number of troubles that never really happened. It was Seneca that said we suffer more in our imagination than we do in reality. That we fear more often than we're hurt. And this is something that has, quite obviously, by the age of some of those quotes, going back 2,000 years, something that's plagued pretty much everybody pretty much forever. So finding healthy and effective ways to deal with fear, pretty important. And one of the people that I respect and follow is Tim Ferriss. And he did a really good TED Talk on what he calls fear setting, which is something he developed to help him actually go after and do the things that he wanted to do regardless of the fears that were getting in the way. I highly recommend going to watch the TED Talk. He goes into a lot of detail about what led up to him having to come up with a system like this. And it's just a really, really good talk. Highly recommend it. So what is fear setting and why should you care? Well, fear setting is kind of like goal setting, except with fears. You basically list out all of your fears that you have in relationship to something you want to do. Maybe starting a new business, going on a trip, having a conversation with someone, just whatever big decision you're trying to make where fear is holding you back from actually doing it. And sometimes that fear is warranted. And I mean, that's what fear is for. It's your body's way of saying this could be dangerous. Usually it's not nearly as dangerous as it feels like it is. And that's what fear setting helps with. It helps you really take a look rationally at the decision and whether it's a good decision that you should do or something that you shouldn't do. So Tim Ferriss breaks it down into 3 pages because he does everything on paper, writes it all down. And that's an important step of the process for him. On the first page, first thing you do is actually list out all the worst case scenarios. So everything that could go wrong if you go through with the decision. The example he uses is taking a 4-month vacation away from his business, first business that he built. He was trying to build himself out of the company so that it wouldn't be so dependent on him being there. Because at the time he was working 14, 15-hour days, 7 days a week. But he was very hesitant to go on this trip because he was worried about a whole lot of things. And that's where this fear setting exercise came into play. So list down all the worst case scenarios. If I go on this trip, the IRS is going to send me a notice. I won't be there to receive it. I'll get penalties and audit and all that bad stuff that goes along with it. I go on this trip and the weather's awful. Things get canceled and I have a worse time there than I would have working, and it just makes everything worse. And you just go down the list of all the worst case scenario things that could happen, all the what ifs and what ifs. But you don't stop there, because that's the easy part. That's what most people can do naturally that prevent them from doing anything, is all these negative what ifs. So the next thing you do is you go down that list, and for each one of those, you say what you would do if it happened. So IRS letter comes in and you're not there to get it, and then you get audited. What do? Well, he would, call an attorney, have a meeting with the attorney and the accountant and go over the books. And if there was any fines, he would have to pay the fines. And that's what he would do. He just literally went out and wrote down what would happen in that worst case scenario. Next line item is, what can you do now to try to mitigate that from happening? So he could reroute his mail from going to his business to going to an address where he knew someone would be to open it. So to hopefully mitigate that from ever happening. And you go down the list and you want 10 or 15 worst case scenarios. You really want to stretch it out to make sure you have all your bases covered. All right, and so now at this point you have defined your fears. You know what the worst case scenarios are, you know what you would do if those happened, and you know what you can do to try to mitigate those things. So all the questions have been answered on worst case scenario. And then you go to page 2, and that's where you're going to list what's the upside, what's the benefit or the possible benefit of a partial success or an attempt. So we're not even saying you succeed. So the goal of his trip was to get himself out of the business. Let's say that didn't happen, but he went on the trip anyway. What would be a benefit of him just going on the trip and attempting it? And you go through and you list out all the possible benefits of a partial success. So now you know what the upside and what the positive benefits could be if you went through with it. And then you get to the last page, and the last page is the cost of inaction. So this is what would happen if you don't go through with the decision. For him, it was if he didn't go on a trip and didn't try to get himself out of the business. His scenario, he'd continue to work 14, 15-hour days, 7 days a week, end up burning out, probably making bad business decisions, and eventually running the business into the ground. So that's a worst case scenario if he doesn't go on the trip. And you want to do this for 6 months, 1 year, and 3 years out of what your life will look like if you don't do anything. This way, hopefully, at the end of it, you have a very clear picture of not only what's holding you back, but what it's holding you back from, and what's the cost if you don't do anything at all. And you really have to have all that in order to make a really educated decision on whether to do something or not to do it. Because let's be honest, if we just go off our feelings, we don't do much of anything. And hopefully what you'll see by doing this exercise, usually the potential upside of even an attempt or a partial success greatly outweighs the negative effects of not trying. Typically, the fears that are holding you back can easily be repaired or prevented in the first place. Hopefully, this exercise will be beneficial to you. Tim Ferriss says it's one of the most important things that he does. He does it once a quarter, and it's a great tool to help you make decisions and to make sure you don't have fears holding you back that are not based in truth and reality. So if you enjoyed this, I really recommend you go watch the TED Talk that he gave. I'll put a link in the description down below to that if you want to go see it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. If you already do fear setting and you get some benefits from it, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.